Okay, so it was a great call yesterday. The great Twitter Spaces, a lot of discussion. Is there anything anybody wants to talk about today? I would think sort of it would be nice to, if not like talk about what how we can help Hank or what your takeaways are, Hank, from the call. Um, Anything tangible we could do to help the project move forward.
Good question. Let's see. I think there was a really interesting train of discussion where I was, saying how a goal of this project is like allowing BNS name holders to like tap into L1 liquidity. And there was some pushback around sort of like, well, maybe not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but that sort of utility is like crucial. And so I've thought about only vaguely and not like as something I'm implementing this project, like ways that you could actually sort of manage a name when it's on L1. For example, are there ways to like update a zone file or just like kind of things like that? And so I haven't put a ton of thought to that, but I think that's kind of an interesting train of thought. For example, like can you still log in with your BNS name if you're holding it as a ordinal? Like Mark, maybe that's kind of like an interesting sort of prompt for you. I would imagine it's kind of like a, something to do with like Bitcoin based signatures. And I know there's some complexity there if it's like a Taproot wallet, but I don't know, seems interesting.
I mean, it seems like that's the value of L1 names. Like it seems like the liquidity is a short-term thing. Um, and like perhaps a way just to like it's really a product positioning thing. Like don't say like instead of saying like locking up names to like put them on L1, be like, oh, well, you're putting them in like layer one trading mode or something like that.
Mhm.
Like and then later if there's the ability to use them, then like later on the roadmap you can enable them to like do more stuff. Because I mean,
Mhm.
listening to Ragnar, I generally, I really am sympathetic to Ragnar's view because I mean, it sounds like you're basically breaking the names to like trade them, and like that's I don't think that's what anybody wants. Nobody wants to break the names; they want them to be useful. Um, but like it's just like a bunch of technical constraints and time constraints which make it easier to do this first. And so maybe there's just a way to like, I mean, it seems like it's more of a comms like product positioning problem than
Mm.
like
Yeah.
because I think that we all want to get to the same place where you could use the names as much as possible.
hmm I mean, I think some people do just want to like be able to trade it as an ordinal, and sort of like by definition, less priority around using it as like their
Yeah.
identity. But that doesn't mean that it should be like a priority, or like certainly not like the only thing that's focused on. I think like yeah, it is a product positioning thing because on day one, it's hard to imagine. It's either like we spend way more time on this project building all these other utility based things, or we launch it in a way that uh, yeah, just has like less kind of identity based solutions. So yeah, maybe we find a way to like sort of define what those next steps could be. Like for example, um, I run like a BNS API, and as part of this project, I am going to build like a resolution endpoint for getting the Bitcoin owner of a specific name. So like, if Hank.btc is on there, I could resolve to the current inscription owner's address. And that could be supported in something like Hero for send BTC to a BNS name. But like, that requires adoption of this new API or like some way of determining like using the current, zone file based approach, but then also this if it's detected as in an inscription. So yeah, figuring out like what those kind of next steps would be. Yeah.
I'm personally woefully behind on all the details here. I missed this space and I gotta catch up on the form writings. But
Mhm.
I think broadly speaking, um, I'm interested in expanding the wallet support so that whether a name or domain is on L2 or L1, that the wallet can be as agnostic as possible. but that's the general goal. And so, yeah, if it's on L1, there might be other APIs or techniques and also UX paradigms we need to represent. There's clarity for the user, but hopefully they can do as much or as much as you can on L1 versus what happens on L2. I think that's a general goal.
Yeah, even go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, there's a bunch of, you can imagine a bunch of different ways of approaching this. Like one is to have like two tracks, right? The .btc's on L2 and then .sats on L1, and then try to like add the functionality to the L1 and then like meet in the middle at some points where like the L2 names can adopt the functionality to be added to L1s and vice versa. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like the questions like how do you update a zone file, etc. Like answer these questions for L1 on existing on a namespace that is seen as being L1 only at the moment, right? And then like once you solve those problems, like some people over here could solve those problems, and then some people over here, like, okay, how do we transfer them? And then try to like meet in the middle, and then like the stuff for wallets is just ultimately solved by a bunch of APIs, like and conventions.
Yeah, one thing I would say is I agree with you, Larry, in the sense of trying to figure out a cohesive strategy for L1 to L2, L2 to L1, and specific .sats, since that's where all the names are. There's more .sats names than there are BNS names, as far as I know as of today. And so I think there's actually more potential with .sats on stacks than there actually is for .btc on stacks. The reason why I say that is because, well, there's more names, first of all. Second is there's already .btc name ordinals. 3 or 4 different versions, unfortunately. But I think getting the .sats ordinal holders onto stacks is a great way to onboard a whole bunch of new people onto stacks. And so I think it'd be really helpful to, you know, I'm very busy, like my team with trading, we're focused on trading. I do want to see .sats happen on stacks, and I do want to see them be able to get a corresponding, perhaps new name, ordinal .sats name. Anyways, so I think it is important, Larry, to kind of think of those things. Then it becomes easier to then decide, okay, for .btc names on ordinals, how do we want to do that? So that's, I'll try to be coherent. So that's one thing, is let's think about both of those. Let's think about .sats. Okay, my second thing would be like going to .btc names. I think the next step probably is, for me, to be specific about what I think would be a more optimal approach, which is starting with Hank's current plan, which I really like, where you connect your wallet, you are presented with an SVG or image file, and then you can then, you know, write in your name, Ragnar.btc, but kind of stop there. Don't wrap it, you know, don't lock it or anything, and just take that file and describe it. Because I think some people maybe don't understand kind of what I'm talking about, or understand exactly the process that I propose, which is basically Hank's approach, but just stopping short of wrapping the names. And so maybe I just like write that out. I thought I did, but I guess it's not clear. Either I can do that on Hank's posting, or I can just maybe make a separate one, which isn't ideal, but good for clarity. And then that way we have like a very clear thing of, okay, option A has these pros and cons, option B has these pros and cons. Here's exactly what it is, and we're gonna have like a real discussion about that. So it gets more specific. So that's what I think are like next steps. So first, like, let's also think about .sats and what we can do with that, how to do it, and then step 2 is going to the .btc names, having 2 clear paths as like next steps.
Yeah, I think I am interested in, because we didn't really talk about the .sats part yesterday. So I am pretty interested to hear, you know, current thinking on that, because Ragnar and I did talk about this a couple of weeks ago. And so, like, you know, I think I have an idea of like what he's thinking about. But yeah, I'm curious, like, I don't know, do you want to do a quick explainer of your current thoughts, and then also, like, I don't know, status? Like you said, devs are busy, which is understandable, but is it a rough plan, or is it actually maybe going to happen like sooner? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So the basic idea is that we really want to, everyone has their .sats name. We really want to be able to give them, or at a very low cost, their corresponding .sats name on Stack. So if I have Ragnar.sats on ordinals, I should be able to get Ragnar.sats on Stacks. So that is the basic goal, is people already have those ordinal names to get the Stacks names. Is the exact method of doing this, Hank and I talked about this with Jeff, how to do that. And there's two basic ways, I think, is what it sounds like. One is kind of the one that you put, which is kind of like a smart contract type of deal. The other one would be like a burning mechanism, where you burn one thing and then you get the Stacks name. So I think for those two, you laid out I think a clear method of doing the first approach, which is sort of a smart contract way. And so I think I have to kind of write out the second approach, or if you want to, but I have to write out the second approach of like what's more like a burning mechanism type of approach. And then by seeing those two again side by side and talking about the pros and the cons of each, then we could then have clarity as to the next steps. And in terms of your question about like getting it done, like, yes, obviously Trajan's busy, everyone is busy, but it's a top priority for me. And with Trajan, we should have a little bit of time hopefully coming up to maybe focus on this. But I really would like to work with other people, other teams to make this happen, who are specialized about the tools, whether it's Hank's team, whether it's another team. There's, I think, a few teams that could probably want to help with this. So yeah, because I think it could bring so many Bitcoiners onto Stacks. And the other good thing about like this, the good thing about stats on Stacks is that there's, as we talked about this, like there's a barrier to entry Bitcoiners to get Stacks names. They don't own STX, they don't own Stacks, like they don't own any, so they can't buy one name. But maybe if there's a way, stats, to give them the name or make them pay for it in Bitcoin, whether it's $1, $5, whatever it is. If they can just get it with Bitcoin, that would hopefully onboard more people. So,
Philip, or at least I think it's Philip. Do you have your hand raised? Did you want to chime in?
Hello. Well, sorry about being in a place that is very noisy, but what I've been facing is that there's a huge opportunity, for we're talking about the general ID, digital ID based on blockchain, and also this as a way to solve the problems of identity of the world. So the population is 7,000 million people that require digital ID. So then, what is if we don't move in a way that in a united way, that we can approach offering this way of solving the problems ID using blockchain, and also leading with the Stacks BNS system, that actually doesn't matter if you do it in Bitcoin or in Stacks or Ethereum, whatever, because it's essentially we are solving a digital ID problem. Because right now, if we just don't move in facing trying to get the mass people, Google or Facebook are going to, or now with X or Twitter, are going to try to cover that area. So what I've been thinking of, for example, all the way how to approach the big market. You see, the financial sector, all the applications that are coming up with their own ways or the old ways of doing ID. That's something that is being covered, but not by blockchain. not even Ethereum, not even none of them, and so we can lead that, not even the Bitcoin concept, you see. So there's a huge opportunity, you see, of trying to provide this way of that. So what I will be doing for in order to cover that is to add the functionality of OpenID as a way as a beachhead in order to provide people using the digital wallet, you see here or XBears, in order to enter to that space of, but just for the purpose of the digital identification or credential verification. So we're coming, we have been working on that. That has been always there in the BNS system. So that we hope next week we have a prototype and the people to use it. And also the profile.xck.app already has that functionality there, but we had to do it all, the whole thing, in order so the people can create their credentials and the names, and also a way to check all that identity. You see, like a web presence for your digital. Of course, we're using the internet. We're not so pure in that sense, but that's a way that we can provide a solution for the big standardization that is coming up in the world using OpenID Connect. You see, so that's my proposal, and we are working on that because we see that's a way. That is a concrete way in order to the blockchain world, and especially stacks and Bitcoin, going to offer something that can be solved. You see, of course, we are using the protocol did web as a way to instead of just have a fixed way of have server of credential verification. That's more or less so. About who's .SAT or .BTC, we don't care. It's just providing a blockchain solution for the identity. That's a wonderful thing. So we had to let the people do whatever they did, but don't force in a centralized way. That's one way or the only way, because the problem is much bigger than our capacities. Well, that's my contribution. Sorry about maybe talking about something else.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with this OpenID stuff, but you said you'll have a demo hopefully next week, so I'm really interested to see it. And if there's anything you have kind of written up about it, I'd love to read more.
I'm unfortunately very familiar with OpenID because I got into that before Bitcoin.
Do you have thoughts about it, Larry?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if there's anything new coming up, but I mean, OpenID is the underpinnings of like what Apple uses for signing with Apple ID, what Google uses for signing with Google. I mean, like it's 15 years old now. I mean, it's like early 2000s sort of stuff, and it's like the identity of separating identity provider, which is a server, right? So like in this case, Apple's identity endpoint is the server, and then like you have a bunch of clients that ask the server, like, is this to attest to this person? I'm not familiar like with how like what using like something on a blockchain, like what problem that really solves. And like, I mean, in terms of, I would say the standardization has already happened. I mean, like, so what we saw with OpenID was like, the idea was that anybody could run their own OpenID provider. I ran it on my web server for a while. But then what happened was, like the clients would be responsible. So like I have an app, right? And anybody can sign with OpenID, and like Hank's using his own, and like Ragnar's using his own, and like Ragnar can't use it, like can't log in. Like he emails support and says, I can't log in. Turns out it's with his OpenID provider, right? So like what happened was they started to like only whitelist providers, right? So only like a few well-known ones that worked well could be used to sign in, and then eventually like just became Google. You can use sign with Google, sign with Facebook. So I mean, this is like the same thing that would happen with Jabber XMVP. Like we saw like it's actually really the federated model. It's like a federated model, right? So the problem with federated models is like you have some instances that are very good and very reliable from professionals, and some that are not. And then so people all tend to the ones that are run by the professionals that have a lot of money, that are reliable, and then other people that build products on them are like, well, I can't spend time messing around with like random person who's like running their own thing. Like that's just like I can't provide support for that, right? So like I'm just gonna let people sign with the professional ones, and then you just get to like one or two providers. So like this is repeated in the internet like over and over and over. So I'm not sure how this is different.
Interesting.
Well, essentially, what we that's a big share in terms of using the IDs, you know, in order to provide the password for the login and password aspect. So then the credential management is done by the you know, the self-sovereign user. So then with the wallet, will authorize and change the password by itself, not by the federated organization. So the only way that, and that's a database that we already have around the world using our Stacks nodes and eventually Bitcoin nodes also. And that's available everywhere. So that's the user database that is accessible and multi company or multi organizations accessibility. So with that, and then the way is that, of course, you know, the credential verification has to be some servers that follow the OpenID Connect protocol, and but then that will check that up in the with the zone file. So the zone file is the stack zone file is very essential, because there you can store the signature of the secret of the password. So you see, you just find, and then you just compare if you have the same signature signed by the user that has a stack address. So, but that's behind the scenes. You see, the people don't see that. Because that's something that the user is using at the behind. But then the essential of that is that the DID web was established by the w3.org, and so that also includes all the blockchain systems. So then with that, you get the DID.json file that says where you will authorize my OpenID password, and then that points to the application that will check that up in the zone file. So that's more or less what we are working on, and still it's still not 100% finished. So we are going to send an MVP for hopefully next week or following week, but in order to test that up. But that's, imagine, you know, having all these our stacks, because I heard the numbers, 300,000 stacks and domain names is nothing. We have 7,000 million people that require digital ID. And so 300,000, and also the Ethereum, I don't know how many they have. They may be less than that, because if the more powerful is Bitcoin, but then the rest of the world, we can provide that instead of the other legacy stuff. Then, of course, we have to move the people, you know, from the base of this usage of the digital wallets that we are providing. Then we can move them to other kind of services that we have been already creating and trying to promote. But you know, just the internal market of our stacks community is not sufficient. It's too small, you see. And the market, you know, I'm in fintech you know, summit here, and I can see that all those are our customers. So we are trying to provide this thing in order for their credential verification to put it there, you see, instead of using Google or Facebook, because Google and Facebook quietly, they are moving that in this arena. So not only taking the data for advertisement, but also they're taking the credential verification movement. You see, they're going to win. And also the guys of Twitter is also doing that, but they do it quietly. So why we don't take all the movement in the world, blockchain, not only Bitcoin, but all the world, and move them to this standardization and take that advantage? And that's my crazy idea. That's
Cool, thanks. I mean, why don't you post a demo on the forum? I think people would love to try it out next week when you have it.
I can only stay for a couple more minutes, but I think to recap, we were talking about a couple different potential ways to sort of add utility to L1 names beyond just making them be tradable. So, you know, hopefully working with like Hero Wallet and Xverse to support kind of equivalent functionality, you know, that they already support for BNS names. Looking into like ways that something like .sats does a zone file update, and seeing if that's the right approach. But basically figuring out a way, to, you know, some way of doing zone file type things when it's on L1. And then on the .sats front, hopefully getting, you know, further in terms of like a proposal, or at least like laying out different proposals for implementing .sats so that we can, you know, get some feedback and move forward. And Ragnar, I'm happy to, you know, help provide feedback or whatever on that front.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think for me, the next step for .sats is basically kind of taking what you worked on and then kind of tweaking that a little bit. Because it's, yeah, okay. I'll see what I can do, and then I'll shoot it over to you and get your feedback.
Cool.
Yeah, because hey, if we could get like more layer 1 functionality, that'd be great. So
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Well,
hopefully a demo and more info from Paradigma on the OpenID stuff.
cool. Well, thanks everybody. I have to run too. And let's continue this online. It sounds like we're at least coming to agreement on what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Yep. See you later. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.